No, it doesn't seem like 5 years. And I know that most people would probably say that, oh Christ, it doesn't seem like 5 years. But because so much has gone on in between, you know, there was my album, then my tour, then the Genesis album, the Genesis tour, Eric Clapton album, and Eric Clapton tour, Buster, Groovy Kind of Love, Two Hearts. Yes, it's been a busy 5 years, really. But no, if I'd have known it was going to be 5 years, I would have been very depressed, I think, knowing that it was going to be that long before I had another crack at doing another album. But in the long run, I think it's probably a good thing. I've accumulated an awful lot of material. Some of this stuff was, well, there's a bit on the album that was actually written in 1978. But I mean, there's bits that have happened really ever since I finished the last album. I've started writing, or kept writing. So there are things that have been around that long. Most of the things, I suppose, have been written in the last couple of years. I sat down for ages before we started the album to write the lyrics, because I wanted to go into the recording of the thing knowing what I was going to be singing about. We did vocals all the way along, you know, all throughout the whole album, which is rather than just do it in one big chunk at the end. Usually we have to take a couple of weeks off, write all the words, and then come back and then sing them all, you know, and you're fed up with singing every day. So we just interspersed the whole thing, so it was a very enjoyable album that way. The horns were digital, recorded digitally, and they sound a lot sharper. And also, the horn charts are pretty awesome this time. I did it the same way as I normally do. I go da 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 into a microphone, cassette player, send it to Tom Tom in Chicago, and he makes sense of all my babbling. And then the first time I actually hear it is when we go into the studio and the guys play it. But the one thing, there's the beginning of Hanging Long Enough, which is like a horn introduction to the whole album. I just went out there and said, listen guys, I've always wanted to hear something that goes, and they said, triple tonguing, eh? Well, I don't know about that. We'll have a go. And so we just wrote something in 10 minutes. Ambition and greed, really. There's two sides of it. One is, if you do hang in long enough, you know, you do probably get what you want. But there's an awful lot of carrots being held in front of people to get them to do things. And ambition's a strange thing. It gets people to do very strange things. It makes people do things they wouldn't otherwise do. I'll write the thing. I'll straight away record it. And then I'll start overdubbing onto it to get ideas, and then I'll start singing. And so whenever I write anything I sing, I obviously record and I write down. And when I come to writing the lyrics, I will refer back to this. And if I can use what I've sung spontaneously, I will. And Hanging Long Enough was something that I just sang when I originally started singing on the demo. And I just thought, okay, well that's my chorus. Now I've got to make sense of that. And so that's what I did. Other songs, the lyrics in their entirety pretty much come spontaneously. This, I think, is the most solid album that I've done since Face Value, you know, for me. I think it's as important an album, coming when it does, 5 years after No Jacket. I think a lot of people are out there who think of Buster, they think of Groovy Kind of Love, Two Hearts. I think in the last couple of years I've gone soft, you know. Whereas in fact, I really look at it as a project. You know, I did Buster because I loved the story, loved the script. I wanted to act. It was a great vehicle for me. But it was a 60s vehicle, and therefore me and Lamont sat down and wrote Two Hearts, you know, which was a 60s song. And it wasn't what Phil Collins would do as a solo artist necessarily, although I'm very, very proud of that song. But it's a project song, you know, and like Groovy Kind of Love was a project song. It's not what I would necessarily, it wouldn't have fitted in on this album, which is why I didn't really cover any songs on this album. But I feel that people don't see that. They just see it as another Phil Collins single, another Phil Collins single. So really, I tried on this album to try and haul people in to back to where I actually am, which is as a drummer, singer, songwriter, if you like, that are capable of writing songs. I think very moving things. I mean, my best songs on, I think for a while now, are on this album. It's about Northern Ireland, as far as I'm concerned. There's so much which in England we're used to all the time, and in Ireland, of course, it's on the doorstep. But everywhere else in the world, it's just another news report. But if you live in England and you sort of constantly, people getting blown to smithereens because of this thing that's been going on for the last 20 years, but also for a lot longer in Ireland. It's only just come to the front in the last 20 years. You see newsreel of kids throwing petrol bombs, and they don't really know why they're throwing petrol bombs. They're just throwing petrol bombs because their brothers threw them, and then their dads threw them, and their dads' dads, you know. And they're just it's inbred now, this violence. And I just thought, you know, someone somewhere, and it's got to be from both sides. It's got to sort of say, hang on, this life means more than this. You know, this something's got to stop. I can only write conversationally. I can't write as a poet, as it were. I'm not a very well-read person. You know, my education kind of stopped when I went to drama school, which is when I was 14. You know, I mean, I went to a grammar school before that, but when I went to drama school, I was always out doing auditions or doing the odd job. And I've since lived by common sense and sort of knowledge. You know, and I'm not a street person, you know, I'm not sort of pretending to be that, but at the same time, it's just common sense, and I tend to look at relationships and sort of, nothing aggravates me more than seeing two people not talking to each other about something they could help. If they just stopped and talked to each other, they would actually solve the problem that they have. And so I think I relate to people like that because I write songs in a conversational way. Do You Remember, which is on this album, you know, is a song that it's just in the normal person's speech and the normal person's way of thinking. It makes sense. I've been a fan of his since The Birds, and I really wanted him because his approach to harmony is unique. He will pick out notes from the air that nobody else would sing. So I had never met him until the Atlantic Records 40th anniversary party, and we were backstage, and I went. They were rehearsing, and I knew Graham Nash, and I met Steele a couple of times, Steve Stills. And I said, I've never met David, I've got to meet, he's a big hero of mine. So they introduced me to him, and I went backstage and said, can you sing on my next album? And he said, sure. And he was such a sweet bloke, because by this time he'd got himself sorted out. And I stayed in touch, and I sent him a tape when I was in Los Angeles, just recently for the album, and we'd already set it up, you know, previously, so he knew I was coming in. Sent him a tape of the two songs, and he loved them, came in, and he was wonderful. And we sat down at a piano, and because I'd given him a tape, he showed me his ideas. And he did exactly what I thought he'd do. He came out with these little ideas that nobody else would think of.